Good afternoon. Do you hear me? Okay. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the session about Inspire benefits, usage, and users. Regarding the interest of you, I think it is really a hot topic, and we are all speaking about costs, but we would also like to know a lot about the benefits, and sometimes it is really hard to assess benefits from the SDI and Inspire. My name is Vlado Cetl. I am from University of Zagreb, from Croatia, and I will chair this session. As you see on our agenda, we have 5 presentations this afternoon regarding different topics. So the first one will be from Mr. Glenn Vancauwenberghe, a new SDI assessment method. Inspire for innovation and growth in the private sector, views and opinions from key stakeholders. Since we have 90 minutes, so I think for each presentation we will use, let's say, up to 15 minutes, so that we save some time for the questions and discussions. I hope it is okay. So Glenn, the floor is yours.
Forward and backward. Yeah, I'm not going back.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Glenn Vancauwenberghe from the University of Leuven in Belgium. I will give you a very brief presentation on one of the activities that we've done in the context of a European project, the so-called Inspire project. Now, to begin, I would just like to say a few words about the project for those of you that have never heard about it. It's in fact an FP7 support action that is finished April this year, in which we have done several activities all related to the role or the potential role and the potential involvement of private companies in the implementation of Inspire. So in fact it was a quite general objective of the project. The idea behind the project that in fact in the context of Inspire implementation that requires a lot of work and maybe private companies and SMEs in particular can fulfill a role in the implementation of Inspire, which could lead to innovation growth in the private sector. So that was the main idea behind the whole project. About the project partners of the project, most of them were SMEs, but besides them also some public administration, some governments were involved, and also some research institutions such as the University of Leuven. It's important, most important to know is that it covered in fact 12 different member states in Europe, so most of our activities were related to those 12 member states. And what I'm going to talk about is one thing that we've done in the context of the project is a study in fact of the GeoICT sector in Europe, and about the role and the participation of that sector in implementing Inspire in different member states, and also about the impact or the potential impact of Inspire on those companies. I also had a presentation on this topic last year, but I'm trying not to say the same. Just to illustrate the difference, what we've done last year, or what we talked about last year, was in fact about a survey, a large-scale survey, an online survey that we have organized to collect information from, I think, almost 300 different private GeoICT companies in Europe, and we asked them some information about what they are doing, what are their key characteristics, how are they involved in Inspire, what do they know about Inspire, and to what Inspire has already an impact on their performance and on innovation in their company. Now, I think the results of that presentation can be in fact concluded in what we've called an Inspire-based classification of GICT companies in Europe. So based on the results of our survey, we saw that in fact all the companies, and especially the companies that participated in the survey, can be divided in three groups that have the same size. In fact, you can say, or we saw that 1/3 of all the companies, GICT companies in Europe, they do not know about Inspire at all. They have never heard about it. They do not know what it's about, so they are not aware of Inspire. That was the first group. Then we saw that we were able to distinguish a second group, also 1/3 of all companies that already have heard about Inspire. They know the general objective of it. They know what Inspire is about, but they themselves, they are not doing anything related to Inspire at all. So they know it, but they are not involved in it. And then in fact, it's only 1/3 of all the companies that are in fact doing something that is really related to Inspire. So they're actively involved in the implementation in one or several member states, and they have also, compared to the other groups, they have more advanced knowledge. So while the second group knows about the objectives, the general principles of Inspire, you see these companies are really have knowledge and competences related to metadata creation, network services, data specifications, etc. Now, if you look back at the benefits of Inspire, it's quite logically that at this stage, it's only the third group of companies that in fact already see some benefits of Inspire, because they are involved in it and they get some contracts, they're doing business related to Inspire. Okay, what we are going to talk about this year. So we did a survey in the context of the study. Besides that, we also visited some stakeholders, key stakeholders in different member states, and we talked to them about in fact the same topics, about what are you doing in Inspire, are private companies involved, what do they know about it, what is the link between Inspire in your country and companies, is there a specific policy related to it, etc., etc. I think finally in the different member states we did more than 100 interviews. Most of them were with representatives of certain companies. We also talked with some associations if they were available, but we also visited some of the member state contact points and some other governments that were involved in the implementation of Inspire. So we collected information from different perspectives. So what I'm now trying to do in this presentation is to provide you some key lessons that we were able to learn from those interviews. To be honest, it was not so easy because we collected a lot of information. We collected information from different perspectives. Some were saying completely different things. For some of them, Inspire was good. Others said, no, Inspire, it's not relevant for us. So it was not so easy. We have a lot of information, a lot of interesting things. I learned a lot while reading the interviews and while trying to make analysis of it. What I'm trying to do here is to make some general analysis of all the information we have. Now let's start with some good news, especially from the perspective of the companies. To what extent is the private sector needed or essential for implementing Inspire? Now, I think the general idea, most of the people that we've interviewed, they agreed that, without the private sector, private companies that have certain skills, certain knowledge, without them we wouldn't be able to implement Inspire. I think it's a literal quote from one of the interviews that said that from one of the national contact points that looked back at all the NSDI Inspire initiatives that they have taken in the past years. And they said, there is in fact not one project without a private partner. So if we look at all our projects, in some way there was a private company involved, implementing things, doing things, sometimes advising, etc., or supporting us. So that's good news. So without them, from the perspective of the companies, they are needed for implementing Inspire. On the other hand, they also said, still a lot of work needs to be done. So although some member states have already done some valuable and some good things related to Inspire implementation, even in the best or in the most advanced member states, still a lot of work still needs to be done, which can be said, there is still a lot of a lot of interesting opportunities for the private companies. Now let's move on to the less good news, or maybe bad news. If you have a look, what to make it different, what to make it difficult, our analysis, we have different countries. So like you all know, they're all in a different stage of Inspire implementation. Some are quite advanced, some are still at the beginning. Now it's quite logic that has a clear and a very significant impact on the way in which the GICT sector in their country or in a specific country is already developed and is really involved in the implementation of Inspire. What's the main reason for that is that you see most of the companies, or a lot of companies, they really focus on what is happening in their own country. So it's only a small group of companies, the most successful companies that are doing business in several or in most of the European member states. So that you saw, that was a situation if you compare between different countries. What's also important to know is that governments or countries that still need to start, you see that most of them or a lot of them are going back to foreign experts that already have done an Inspire implementation or have advised or implemented a certain component in their country or in several countries. You see that they were now involved in the countries that still need to start the work, in some cases with the support of the local authorities or local consultants, but in many cases they played a quite important role in the implementation of Inspire, which has in fact an impact also on the local companies. So it's in fact it's a good thing to keep in mind. What is an instrument, or what might be an instrument, or what consider certain stakeholders as an instrument to get out of the situation is in fact European projects with private partners, but also governments work together, partners or actors from the well-advanced or more advanced countries, and then that are sharing their experience, that are sharing their knowledge, and that are working together with countries and with private companies that still have to learn a lot. Okay, about the impact of Inspire. There the key lesson, and it's something that I think the majority of the people that we've interviewed were agreed upon. They said, in fact, implementing Inspire itself is only a small part of the work. It's in fact work that will, at a certain stage, will end once all the metadata are foreseen, once network services are implemented, once all the data specifications are also put into place. That is not ending. While in fact most of the work, or maybe most of the valuable work, is in fact start using the data and the services that are available. It's in fact the availability of standardized access of standardized data and services that in fact provides most of the opportunities for the private sector. So it's something that both private companies but also governments were aware of, or that was their opinion. I'm not saying that's my opinion, but that's something that was put forward many times. On the other hand, a lot of them also referred, and especially the private companies, at the stage of the interviews, a lot of them saying, at this stage, the openness, the availability of data in our country, that's not the case. There are still a lot of restrictions. In a lot of cases, it's not clear. We do not know which data are available. A lot of data are not available. We do not know where we can find data and what we are able to use for it. That was, at that stage, was a very bad thing, to be honest. If we have a look at the time, if we compare the situation at the time we did the interviews, that was a few months, I think around 1 year ago. If we compare it right now, I think several countries have in that period, quite short period, have in fact made significant progress in putting into place a more open and more open data policies. And what's the main idea that several companies also have behind the openness of data is in fact that they can play an interesting role in making the link between public sector and their data on one hand, and then the citizen on the other hand. They say it's not the citizen, he's not going to use the data or the services himself. No, he's going to use applications that are built on top of these data and on top of these services, and there we as private companies can play an important role in. Something that I also find interesting, we did interviews with GICT companies, but a lot of them, or some of them, were companies, not typical GICT companies, but that were companies that were involved in the production, use, management, exchange of spatial or location information and data, but they were doing that in one specific thematic domain. So examples, they were working in the domain, all their activities were situated in the domain of air traffic or public safety, marine, so in a certain environment. So in there they were doing useful useful things, valuable things, in some way also innovative things, but some of them were completely unaware of Inspire. Some of them even said, yeah, we know Inspire, but for us to do the work what we were doing in this domain, Inspire is not that relevant. We can do what we want, we can achieve what we want, that's their opinion, without implementing Inspire. So that was their idea. That was in many cases also the idea of the public administration that were hiring them, for which they are working. So you see, I think it's also mentioned in other presentations through in the past days, you see there is still an important role for really widening the scope of Inspire and making other thematic domains aware about the relevance and how Inspire can maybe help them, why Inspire in fact can also be useful for them. And then a final conclusion or a final topic that we had some information about was in fact about whether or not there was an SDI, Inspire policy in place in member states, which also had a look, which also had in which also private companies, also private sector was taken into account. Now in general, the general image, if we compare the member states, you see that a lot of private sector companies were involved, but that was in none of the member states, or in maybe a few, that was not the key objective. All member states see, for us, Inspire is mainly about the public sector data. If we can make use, or if we can help the private sector, if we can help them, support them through implementing Inspire, it's okay, but that's not the primary objective. So a lot of them, especially at that stage, still considered SDI Inspire as a public sector initiative. We saw some good practices to include more and more private sector, private companies in the decision making, in the whole policy processes. We saw it started from informal consultation. I can say, is that good? In some countries, they were happy that they already were included through some informal one-by-one consultation ad hoc, while before, they were completely outside of the entire process. So then you see some other interesting practices or initiatives. You see the coordination structure with a specific and a clear role for private companies. You see the organization of pilot projects in which companies are involved from the beginning, etc., etc. Also important issue related to that is about the representative of, or the issue who represents the private UICT sector. For instance, we in Belgium, we have an association that tries to defend the needs and the interesting or the general needs and the general interests of different companies. Now in a lot of European or in several European member states that's not the case. So there it's in fact each company on its own that defends its own interests, and in some cases the needs and interests of one company are completely opposite to the needs and interests of another company. That was an issue that was brought forward several times. Then it's good that we saw some first steps in several countries towards an SDI, Inspire, as a more society-wide initiative, so that in which the idea became more and more, they can become more and more aware of that idea, and we're taking steps to include academics, private sector, and not as a secondary partner, but really as an equal partner. Okay, to conclude, just some information about how Inspire now tries to solve the problems that we've seen in the study, but also try to in fact to facilitate and stimulate the participation of SMEs and private companies in general in Inspire. We did some very small things. So we created a list of our database, or an overview of all companies, or all companies that were willing to be part of the database, and we allowed them to promote themselves, to get them contact information, to let other potential interested partners know what they are doing and what they want to do in the future, etc., what their competences are. Besides that, we also created a best practice catalog in order to promote good practices in implementing Inspire, in which private companies actually contributed. In addition to that, we created a network, or we did some activities to bring private companies on one hand and then the public sector on the other hand. We did some work, or we tried to bring them together during different activities. So that's what we mean with the network. Maybe the most interesting, in my opinion, instrument or thing we've done was in fact the development of a training package. So in fact to allow companies that do not have the skills or all the skills, or that miss some skills that are needed to implement Inspire, to allow them or to help them to achieve those skills. So it's now consists, I think it's 20 training modules developed by different partners, also taking into account the skills and knowledge gaps that were detected throughout our study. So we try to cover them. So we try to cover the different aspects of Inspire. So we have there are training modules available on quite general aspects, Inspire in general, what it's about, how can private companies achieve benefits from Inspire, but also it covers more detailed aspects. So we have several courses or material related to several aspects of Inspire. So also the key aspects of Inspire, network services, metadata, data specifications, but also more innovative or about topics that go beyond Inspire. So like linked data, we have some about sensor web enablement, so some information. So it's not courses, it's in fact useful. It can be used for self-learning. All the material is available and can be is freely available. You can find it on the website. If you think that's something that might be useful for, I'm not sure, for me, for somebody, my organization, for organizing certain courses, have a look at it, and maybe you can use it. Voila, that was it. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Glenn, for a very interesting presentation. We have a time maybe for one question. Is there any? No, everything was so clear. Yeah, Glenn, maybe I have one short question, because I was also involved at the beginning of this project when I was still at GRC. Yes. Actually, there is no really classification of geo-ICT sector. So what was your approach, how to classify that some SME is really geo-ICT?
That was in fact one of the issues we struggled with in the beginning of the project. I think we have the quite large definition in the beginning. It was in fact everything that we're doing, all companies that were doing with something with geo-ICT in a general way, but we also have a look at the more Inspire-related topics, so data modeling, network services, etc., etc. But that was one of the issues we struggled with in the beginning. I'm not saying that we solved that part of the that we solved the problem entirely, but I think we found a pragmatic approach that was useful for our study.
Thank you very much. And we continue, we move to next presentation. Is Bastiaan, I think, no?
Whoa. There are not many places left, are there? Oh well. Hope you all can hear me also in the corridor. Yeah, well, I'm going to tell you something about a new STI assessment method that we are developing. And is a PhD student of mine, is Bujanushi. Unfortunately, he is traveling somewhere else in Europe, so he's not able to present his research here. I'm a supervisor. I don't know the exact details on his research, but I hope if you have any questions, then I hope I can answer them. Well, the presentation is pretty much straightforward. The STIG, the SDI assessment, why do we really have that? Then stress testing, going into the financial infrastructures, where stress testing is quite mature and applied. And then a little bit about the framework of the STIG, and then the conclusions and the further research. Talking about the STIG, someone sitting next to me as well, there's another abbreviation here coming into the SDI domain, where we talk about GIS and all kinds of other abbreviations. Well, the STIG is maybe known to you as this top gear mystery guest who is testing the cars. What can I say here? The STIG exists for only one reason alone: to bring every last drop of performance out of any car he drives around, our demanding test track. The STIG without capitals is the car testing system. The STIG with the capitals is the stress test for infrastructure for geoinformation. We are wondering whether we can wring every drop out of the SDI and then still make sure that it's functioning as we think it should function. Talk about SDI assessment. Why are we doing that? Well, there's a lot of investment in these SDIs, and we want to know why we spend so much money on the SDI. Are they really effective, efficient, are they robust, or maybe even how many lives are being saved by SDI? And then, of course, we want to know what should be the next step. And without assessment and an outcome of the assessment, you don't know really what to do next. Several years ago, Hugh Cromfoots, Lucas Cruz, and myself, we developed a multi-view framework where different kinds of SDI assessment methodologies were assessed and even sometimes applied. I was just before the break in a session where the Greek SDI was assessed, and they used the, well, you were sitting there, the maturity model that we developed, and apparently that model worked for Greek society. But we still thought there was a need for a new assessment framework, and that was triggered by the disasters in Haiti, the disaster in Japan with the Fukushima nuclear power plant problems, and also the Katrina big disaster in the US. Quite relatively early before this disaster happened, we assessed all these SDIs, and we thought, well, the Japanese SDI is really mature, excellent SDI, the way you should have an SDI. SDI collapsed with this disaster. Haiti was not that good. Well, you couldn't expect better. Also, the US, the SDI collapsed. So our trigger for this research is where is the SDI when you really need it? How robust is the SDI? And all the assessment methods, going back here, do not address that. At least not in a way explaining why the SDI in Japan, for example, was not there when they really needed it. Of course, we want to have it more user-friendly, more useful for practitioners, and we thought that stress testing, which was a hype at that moment, also with the nuclear power plants, but also with the financial crisis, might be an option to test the robustness of the SDIs. So the definition of stress testing is right here. When a load placed on the system raised beyond normal usage patterns in order to test the system's response or unusually high peak load moments. Well, just give you an example of a stress test here. This is the single factor standardized stress test. Let's test the stress of this cup and see when it starts not to perform anymore. Well, it should crash. It should break. Otherwise, well, I better should use a glass and throw it on the wall. And then the stress test was successful. But you can imagine, well, I still could drink some water here and still functions quite well. But I think you get a hold of an idea. At a certain moment, this glass will not function anymore. So then you have reached the highest pressure you can put on that, and that's the stress test limit of this cup. Yeah, you have several areas where these stress tests are applied. So in material sciences for the cup, but also in software testing where you're increasing the load, the number of hits and the number of users. In the past we had this also with open data. Once the data set has been opened, all of a sudden all kinds of users are going to look at the data, and the system collapses because it cannot handle so many users. There's a stress test also there in the software testing. Cardiac testing, well, you may know these tests on a bicycle. You're bicycling, and then the pressure is being upgraded and more, and all of a sudden that's your final test. You reach your maximum, then you step out, and then it's the time you're taking to get to your normal levels again. That's then the stress test for you. That's the amount of physical pressure you can handle. Nuclear power plants, you have similar things, and in the financial sector, we thought is closest to SDI. They're using information, etc. So we started to look into the financial infrastructures to see if there are even enough commonalities between SDI and financial infrastructure to see whether the stress test methodology being used in financial infrastructure can be applied to SDI. Financial infrastructure, well, is the underlying infrastructure for the financial system of countries and also regions. It consists of institutions, information technologies, rules and standards. And that was not our work, that was work by the IFSC, so not cited from the SDI literature or whatever. This is coming from IIC, an independent resource. And the quality of the infrastructure determines the efficiency, the ability of lenders to evaluate risk and borrowers to obtain credit, insurance and other financial products. And there are a lot of organizations involved, users, producers, brokers, intermediary parties. The key components of financial infrastructure and SDIs are very, very similar. Different providers, different users, use a wide range of technological systems, a lot of standards involved there. Interoperability is a key issue, otherwise the bank's system cannot function. And especially the last one, the success of the infrastructure, or the strength of the infrastructure depends on the coherence of the individual components. And you may know this model, if you're from the STI side. That's a common model, the model by Abbas Rai-Biffard in 2004 or something like developed. And if you compare that with the FI model, we've put it in place, we can see it's pretty similar. So that was for us enough reason to look at the financial infrastructure assessment methodology, the stress testing. How are they doing that, and maybe that can be an inspiration for SDI assessment. So in the financial sector, they're using core principles, the Basel core principles, and they're assessing a minimum standard where the banking system should be adhering to. And if you fulfill that minimum requirement, then the system is robust enough to sustain severe pressures that are moving into the system. They have defined 28 principles that are needed to be adhered to, and here's a list of these systems, these criteria, risk criteria. And the way they're doing that, we have a risk factor. Yeah, I don't expect you to read all these. You have a risk factor, then you have a criterion, several criteria per risk factor, and then per criterion you have to score compliant, largely compliant, material, non-compliant, or non-compliant at all. So one example here is the risk factor market risk. So and then you have here two specific criteria. And each bank can score compliant, largely compliant, non-compliant, or materially non-compliant on that. There's more. It's 2, 4, 8 criteria for this market risk. So you have 28 risks, and per risk you can have 8, 10, or 3 or 4 criteria, and you can score on that. And based on compliant or not compliant, in the end, this minimum level of being able to sustain a big risk into moving into the system. This is pretty much as far as Budjar has gone. There are several questions that are on his mind now for the STIG development. One is how fast or how far can the SDI really drive before the SDI system breaks down? Is it possible to break down? Well, in Heidi in Japan we saw it's going to break down. But the thing is, what are the SDI risk factors? That's a discussion in itself, I think. And then, of course, if you have the risk factor, what are the assessment criteria? How do these different criteria and different components relate to each other? If you get one component out of it, what is the impact on the rest? Well, that's the other question. And what is the minimum level for each SDI component to still perform sufficiently? And that's the layout of his research. We are in the first part. We pretty much have been developed. The scenarios will be defined where we are going to assess the risk factors and then do the survey, and out of that we get a bottom line estimation. What is the minimum level of SDI you really should have in order to perform sufficiently if there is going to be a big disaster moving into the system. Then calculating the stress failure factor, and in the end, evaluation of the whole thing. Conclusion, well, we think that for at least testing the robustness of the SDI, the stress testing methodology can be interesting. And it can hopefully increase the robustness of the systems to prevent then big failures as what we had in Japan and Haiti. But there are many more things to do before this model is really operational. And especially the last thing is very challenging to make it workable, realistic and timely. Because the financial infrastructure assessment methodology with 28 principles with at least 8 criteria per principle and doing the exercise only with expert knowledge is a big challenge and not user-friendly at all. And if that's going to be the case, then we haven't much gained compared to the currently existing SDI assessment methodologies. To be continued for sure. Thank you.
Thank you, Bastiaan. I think it's very interesting research. Let's see what will be continued. Any questions? Yes, please.
I like the way this research is done in a very structured way, but I wonder, is there any clue why those 2 SDIs collapsed? Because, well, I think, look at that also. Do you have any idea?
Well, in Haiti there was not really an SDI. But we expected that since there wasn't a pretty good functioning SDI in Japan, they could handle the nuclear power plant breakdown. But the power plant breakdown was so big and destroying pretty much all of the infrastructure around that area that the whole nice base map they had of that area was useless. I don't really think that they had a proper emergency response system over there with backups, with also being able to change from relying on the mapping agency towards the volunteered community, because in the end they appear to have more accurate maps than the official emergency response people. But there's also an issue to maybe Buja should look into more depth. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, maybe one more.
Maybe the problem is to try to use the SDI as a general tool for every contingency. I mean, the people working in emergencies are using vital lines that are preserved against a certain degree of damage. So if you are designing an SDI for emergencies, you should use really reliable mechanism. So you don't expect, let's say, a normal end user SDI for dealing with. I don't know, but okay.
That's also an interesting perspective. But also, you can say what is the minimum level we as a group, also for other functions than emergency response, should require for the SDI. Taking again the Greek example, where we are trying to force Inspire as being the ideal for the Greek situation, you may also think, well, depending on the level of development of this country in the SDI or at a special context, maybe Inspire is not the ideal at all. And so also that component we try to include in the research. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for comment. Thank you, Bastiaan, for the answer. I think we should move on. I think Jaana is the next. Thank you, Bastiaan, once again.
Thanks. Okay. Good afternoon. Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. Good. I'm Jaana Mäkelä from Spatineo, and in my presentation I will tell some results about the recent study about effects of open topographic data in Finland, and also about the content of the maturity model that has been developed to promote the use of spatial information in organizations. From my point of view, national spatial data infrastructure is successful if there are both data providers and very mature spatial data users. And for example, in Finland, more and more spatial data has been opened, and INSPIRE compliant web services are available. For example, 2012, the National Land Survey of Finland opened all its topographic data sets so that anyone can use without any restrictions the topographic data. It includes elevation data, topographic databases, raster data, orthophotos, and so on. So very large amount of very important data. I look at the report of the Finnish INSPIRE web services and found out that last year 55 public organizations, including state and organizations and municipalities, have view services, and 16 organizations have download services. So not very much yet, because actually we have over 300 municipalities in Finland. And according to several research in Finland, there is great potential in organizations for the use of spatial data, but it has not realized yet. And I think that maturity assessment can provide information about the readiness and capability of organizations in the utilization of spatial data. National Land Survey asked Aalto University to do a user study last year on the effects of open topographic data in Finland, because a lot of expectations were on the benefits of the opening, and also the Land Survey wanted to get some reference if the effects are evaluated later after a couple of years, so they know what were the effects 1 year after the opening, and perhaps after a couple of years we see more effects or more benefits. I was then working at the university, and we interviewed 20 major user organizations of topographic data, and we sent an internet questionnaire to 23,000 users of topographic data, to emails that to those persons who had downloaded topographic data from the National Land Survey server. And we got answers from over 3,700 users. And also the users were asked to place or choose the group which they present. So we had 4 user groups: public sector, small and medium-sized enterprises, large enterprises, and private persons. And also the users were asked to tell about the use and benefits of the open topographic data. We also asked about what are the main important factors of the opening of the data. Actually, we listed these 4: data free of charge, easy terms of use, service interfaces, open service interfaces, and download service that the National Land Survey has. And perhaps it's not surprised that the data free of charge was the most appreciated factor of the opening. So the small and medium-sized enterprises and of course private person, they were very happy about so that they don't have to pay for the data anymore. But one essential result was that the view and download services increased the use of open topographic data. All user groups named these as very essential factor. Also, private companies, especially those large companies, named those easy terms of use as one important factor. But what was perhaps surprising for me that the joint effect of the factors of the opening was emphasized by the users in every user group. But then we asked about the use of the open topographic data, and the result was that the increased use of topographic data has mainly occurred in the earlier purposes, especially in the public sector and large enterprises. Perhaps they use more maps, more from different scales, and the laser scan data, which is now free, and you don't have to pay for them. The environment sector uses it much more than before. Also, those organizations who have updated their topographic data once a year or perhaps more seldom, they said that now they use most up-to-date data. And the business, they are using the ortho photos, for example, in the consulting companies and digital elevation models more than before. Then we asked in the questionnaire that the users would say whether they have used earlier topographic data or are they new users. And as you can see that the opening of topographic data has encouraged relatively more users in the small and medium-sized enterprises and among citizens than in large enterprises and public sector, which is quite natural actually. And here you can see that we got quite a lot of answers from each user groups, and that was very, very good thing because now we could rely on these results quite well. In my studies, I have tested the maturity of some user organizations of spatial data, and in some, for example, some cities, the maturity is in a quite low level. So it might be that only the technical sector using the spatial data. And that's why I'm now continuing to developing the maturity model and using this maturity assessment to promote the increased use of spatial data. So you can, in the maturity assessment gives you quantitative information about the bottlenecks. So which are those issues or areas where you need to put your resources, which you should develop. And also, because in this economical situation, it's very important that you invest your resources in right issues, so that you get the most benefit from your investments. The original, then called GIS maturity model, was developed in the university, and it includes several indicators, so you can assess the maturity, how mature is the organization's internal SDI, or how the spatial data is used in processes, internal processes and customer services, for example. And if you do the assessment this year, and then you put some effort in the development, you can measure and assess the maturity after 2 years and compare what has happened, how has the maturity increased. I have now actually extended the maturity model so that for data producers also the key area, how the organization is contributing to the development of national spatial data infrastructure is also assessed. So I will also show the content of this key area and the indicators. Also, when I was doing the original model, I found out that trust was quite essential thing in the increased extensive use of spatial data in the organizations, because in a large organizations there are employers who would like to use spatial data, but they don't trust that the organization can support them in the use. So I found out that certain things have to be in good condition in order to support the trust in the organization. For example, the internal SDI, and so that there are enough resources to support the employees. You must be able to get training to use the spatial data. And of course, in almost every presentation I have heard today, the communication of the benefits and possibilities of the spatial data is very important. But also I found out that you yourself have to do something. So if you are a manager or you are an employer, you must have will and commitment to act for the better utilization of spatial data. So here are the things that we are now assessing whether the organization is contributing to the development of the NSDI. So how easy it is to discover the spatial data that are available for external users, and how easy is it to use to find the spatial web services, for example, for the web pages of the organization. I can say that now I have looked at several web pages of Finnish cities and municipalities, and sometimes it's very, very hard to find the right place where to find the information and the data. Also, we assess the quality of the organization's spatial web services, the annual uptime, response time, security and maintainability. If you are in a private company and you want to base your services on organizations' web services, for public organizations' web services, you have to be sure that the annual uptime is high and the response time is also very short. Also, how the organization communicates with the external users is very essential. So, informs about the possible breaks in the services and about the updating of the spatial data and so. Okay, that was my presentation.
Thank you, Jaana, very much. We have a space for time for questions. Are there any? Yes, there is one. Sorry, I need to give you a microphone because of the recordings.
Thank you for sharing the results of the study on open data. I think they're quite valuable for other states trying to open the data. So the question is the result of the study open data?
Yeah. I expected to hear that question. Yeah, the study was. We have the Finnish reports, and the university wants to publish a scientific article about this research in English. So that's why it's not yet.
I see.
Yeah. But I promised I will help so that we can publish it just after summer or something. So yeah.
Excellent. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks.
I have a very short question. Are your slides open data?
Pardon?
Are your slides open data, the ones you've just shown?
Yeah, these, of course.
They're copyrighted.
Yeah. I'm sorry. Yeah, they are. Yeah. I didn't manage to get off these confidential and copyright things, but they can be published in. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Jaana. I think we move to the next presentation slightly, and it's Carla, I think. No? The floor is yours.
Okay. Yes, I have a case about groundwater management in the Netherlands, and in this case we applied Inspire services in several stages of on the information management. Well, I'll start fast. You see, this is a small village in the Netherlands, and it seems quite quiet, but underground a lot is happening. We have some drinking water facilities, some facilities for drinking waters for agriculture, and more recently, a new development in the Netherlands is the appliance of aquifer thermal energy systems. So it's quite busy underground in the Netherlands, and many rules and regulations apply underground in the Netherlands, protecting the underground from pollution or from interference. These are only a few that apply. There are many more, but the sheet was too small. So the situation is quite complex in the Netherlands. To summarize, many local governments in the Netherlands share the responsibility for underground water. It's municipalities, provinces, the ministry and water boards, they all have a responsibility in groundwater management. Depending on the size of the activity or the kind of activity or the goal where the water is used for, they all have a competency to grant permissions or to make a policy on the groundwater. So this is a map of the province I'm from myself. This is a protected sites map. Another one on drinking water protection zones. And I can overlay finally the places where groundwater is used. So there is many capacities in groundwater. We needed to do something about it, to make more clear about the situation, because the public is asking for more transparency about this. They want to know, where can I get a permission or where can't I get a permission? So we designed the groundwater information cycle. As the public wants to know, where can I use groundwater or where can I build an aquifer thermal energy system, we made a public web map plus feasibility tool. You can look in the web map and you can see, is it feasible to get a permission here for groundwater or for a thermal energy system. Well, if you think, okay, according to the map, that must be done, I'm going to the e-service facility and I'm going for a permission. And if the permission is granted, it's registered in the National Groundwater Permission System, and then the information is served around to the public web map again, so you don't have interference with any groundwater systems in your neighbor's backyard or something like that. Now, where's Inspire, you will ask? We used already 2 Inspire team information systems in the cycle, the protected sites and the administrative borders. And we use them on both sides of the facilities. So the public and the government both had the same layers in their system, so it's more transparent. And we have more wishes still. We didn't implement them yet, but we think we have feasible options with several more Inspire teams, like utility networks, area management, or maybe agricultural facilities, human health. We didn't quite look in that very clearly, but there are possibilities. So the red stars, of the yellow stars, we already used them, and the orange ones, we are still working on them, because we're a data provider ourselves as well. Our groundwater installations are a production facility, so we are having a service, but it's not yet harmonized to Inspire standards. Well, that's the techniques. But first, why we used Inspire? We expected some benefits, but why use it? The first is easy to find data sets and services. When we started making a national groundwater permission system in 2009, we spent a lot of time and effort in getting simply the administrative borders. Now we just had to go to the national SDI and click some services, and wow, there they were, really fast. The next, we got to sustainable data sets and services. Not one project data set downloads and then no one ever looks at it and it's never get updated again. No, it's a sustainable source. And third, from an application point of view, we don't like changes. We want it to be as stable as possible, and we don't like to redevelop our application if the data is changing again and again and again. So a fixed data model is helping us. The fourth, maybe quite logical, but we didn't always know where the data was coming from in the past. But now in the metadata there simply is an email address, and if I have any questions about the data sets, I can simply send a mail and get some answers. And as I told, we are a data provider as well, and apart from the costs, which we don't like, there are benefits from it. Since we have a service, we can simply direct our customers to that service. We often get many demands from engineering firms or environmental organizations. Can we get the data set of all the groundwater systems in the Netherlands? Yes, you can. And then we have to make a download strip of all the private data, and again we have to make a data dump. Now we can simply refer to a service from there it is, you can use it, good luck. The fixed data model of Inspire makes it possible for us to make one service and not 10, everyone his own service, everyone his own data set. It's just there, standardized. And maybe not so good of us, we are approachable for feedback now. As you can see, we tend to have some permissions way outside the Netherlands for groundwater. So it's a free advice for us, so we can go on and improve data quality on the basis of that feedback. Yes, there is further improvement on our case. As I said, data quality is a priority and a lot of effort, because there are a lot of data elements that are not really where they should be. But we are working on that. Our organization has developed a data quality reference model, which I go on further next. And we have some troubles implementing the Inspire production facilities or activity complex model. It's a bit too complex for our situation. About 70–80% of our groundwater systems are quite simple. It's just a pump somewhere in the field on an X and Y location, and that's it. And if you look at the model, it's quite demanding. It's okay if you have a complex situation with several locations and installations, part of a large industrial, but for 70 or 80%, it's a bit too big. And the last one, there is not much knowledge outside the GIS community about Inspire. Well, I know about Inspire because I worked for Geonovum, the national organization responsible for Inspire in the Netherlands. But if I weren't working for it, I don't know if anyone would have implemented Inspire in this groundwater case. I told you about the data quality reference model. We made it because we found some lacks in the standard models that are already there. They're quite instrumental from the data point of view or from the application point of view, and we felt it doesn't quite cover our needs. To us, the user or owner perspective was more important because that is the party that is going to change something about data quality and not the system or the ITIL organization or the information manager. It's just from the user or the owner of data who can change things. So that's why we changed our way of looking at data quality. I'm not going in too fast. The last thing I say is we found it important to make the model appliant to several stages in data management. So we could implement a Deming circle, the plan, do, check, act into the process. So you can do more on data quality, and it's not only a one-off, but an ongoing process during your data management. This is our model. I'm not going to make it too difficult, and I tried to do some mapping of Inspire directive on it. Yes, Inspire has some use for our data quality reference model. On the legislation, why are we doing this, and the governance? Of course, you have the Inspire directive. Data specifications help us there. That's good. On the technical side, conformity checks, we have some Dutch ones as well. Besides that, technical guidance fulfilled some needs, and of course there is a maintenance community starting here on Inspire. And of course, our own organization is managing the Dutch side of things. Well, we're not quite finished, and we have some wishes from Inspire too. The first one, not all information we really need in the process is Inspire information. And that's a bit of a pity, because in the Netherlands we have a simple implementation of Inspire, and sometimes it is, oh, it's not Inspire, so it's not necessary. That's sad. So it's no priority to some data providers. And the second one, Inspire is a directive among many other directives. We know the water directive, the bathing water directive, statistic directives, and they're not quite aligned. So for some data providers, it's a bit one-off. Again, a data obligation you have to fulfill. So if there can be more alignment, we would be very happy about it. Questions?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Carla, for the interesting presentation. We have time for one or two questions, maybe. Are there any? Yes.
Thank you for your really interesting presentation. I have more than one question, but I'll leave it to one. If in the beginning of the presentation you showed about a map which an organization or a citizen can see what he can do on what location.
Yes.
And on the other hand, he can apply is it possible that he looks at the map and the answer is yes, and then he applies for a permit and then the answer is no? Is that possible or not?
That shouldn't be possible because both systems use the same layers. So the way it's checked is for the public and for the government should be the same. But,
okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Maybe some other question? Comment? Seems no. Okay. Thank you, Carla, once again. Very interesting presentation. So we move to the last presentation in this session, and it will be Tony. Yes. You're welcome.
Okay, good evening, afternoon, everyone. Thank you for staying with us. My name is Tony Bush. I'm from a company called Ricardo AEA. We're an SME that deliver environmental consultancy services in the atmospheric, energy, climate change sectors into mainly public sector organisations in central government within the UK, also local government. And I'm going to present a UK perspective on the benefits that Inspire has had for air quality and open data services in general within the air quality community. It focuses on the UK, but it extends to the rest of Europe within the reporting regulations that have recently come in on the air quality side, which are very closely aligned with Inspire, as I'll show you in the next few slides. So I'm an air quality specialist of around 20 years now, and I class myself as an amateur and Inspire enthusiast sometimes. I think I know quite a lot about Inspire, but I'm constantly confirmed wrong. But I've been working with Inspire for the last 5 years, from very early implementation phases for Inspire and air quality with the JRC back in 2009. But I'm going to tell you, first of all, in the next slide, why air quality is important and why Inspire is important for air quality and open data is important for air quality. Then I'm going to cover the story so far of the last 5 years, the core drivers behind what we've been doing for the last 5 years or so, and then the work in the UK and in Europe, but focusing in the UK on implementing Inspire for air quality. We're not quite there yet, but we've made some good steps. And if I ever get access to my developers back in the UK, we'll make some more good steps. But getting access to IT support is often quite difficult, which is one of the challenges. Then we'll talk about the benefits of Inspire to air quality and open data in the UK, the challenges that we've faced at an operational level in implementing Inspire type services. We're not fully there yet. We're not talking about web services, we're still talking about push services. So we'll look at the challenges that we face there, and they're important because if you're working for other environmental domains, those specialists in those fields will have identical problems. And then a look at where we're trying to go next. So, as I said, I'm an air quality specialist, and I've been working with it for 20 odd years, so I must like it quite a lot, I guess. The reason it's important is it can have a significant impact on what you do, whether you go out, what you do outside. It has significant possible health impacts. And these are figures from the UK, but 29,000 deaths brought forward per year is a bad number, by about 29,000, I suspect. So these aren't deaths that would have not occurred if the air quality hadn't been affecting these individuals. They're just live deaths brought forward. It's still a bad number. And in economic terms, that's somewhere, because of the softness of the economics, cost benefits, etc., it's somewhere between 9 and 19 billion pounds per year. And as I say, it can have serious effect on whether you go out. There are also wider impacts on the environment: acidification, that's a well-known story in Scandinavia, eutrophication, deposition, affecting ecosystems, etc., biodiversity impacts. So there is an interest in managing air quality at most levels. And for that reason, there are significant government policies across the board in Europe looking at enhancing the environment and biodiversity, improving the quality of life, and that's a key issue. Those policies are evidence-based. You don't get a policy in air quality unless you have evidence that it's going to generate an impact. So what we're talking about in terms of air quality is a very, very data-rich, observational-rich domain, and evidence is key to supporting and defining the policies. And because there's data there, that's where the open data comes in, and that's where Inspire comes in. And with open data comes the transparency agenda. Is the government actually doing it all it can do to manage air quality? That's important. And also with data you can generate apps, you can generate websites, you can generate information for conveyancy of your houses, to work out if your house is in a black spot or a hot spot. All these sort of things generate wealth. So from that first slide, that overview slide, it should be fairly clear that there are clear synergies between open data, air quality policy, and Inspire. And open data can support government policy drivers through increased data availability. So that's pushing out to the public as well as other research organisations so that they can do their research in an efficient way. Provide improved structure, and that's a big thing, I think. The whole conference is about Inspire for governance, and Inspire does enforce improved structure, improved governance. The vocabularies that we've developed in the last year have really improved in that respect as well. And discovery level metadata, discovery portals have improved accessibility. And of course, open licensing is the key to open data. And for the UK has adopted the UK's Open Government Licence, which is an open licence based on the many flavours out there. I'm not sure which one it was based on, but there's no registration involved for the OGL, and there's a link to it later. So the Inspire initiative, I think, has empowered open data. Whereas open data, I think you presented, Bastiaan, earlier in the day, the differences between the Public Sector Information Directive and the Inspire Directive, whereas the PSI Directive sort of talks about, yeah, you should do this where you can and where appropriate and where proportionate. Inspire says you shall do it and you should do it like this. So it enforces some sort of regulatory component to delivering all these requirements up here. So it empowers open data, at least in the UK air quality community. So, based on that, there are a variety of policy benefits to the UK government. And in terms of improving air quality, I've binned them into 3 groups here. Improved air quality. The specialists want to get the air quality down, then you've got economic growth and jobs, transparency, and cost efficiency. Open data, through sharing, improved sharing, it raises awareness. And then through improved awareness, it drives behavioural change, which might be people not taking their car to work on a particular day when there's an episode going on, which was quite familiar in April of this year, and faster responses to policy issues, including coordination across borders, etc. At an economic level, everyone's starting to think of data as an asset. That's a core feature of the open data policy and strategy within the UK. So opening up data allows it to get reused and enables businesses, gets reused building apps and innovative websites, conveyancing, that sort of thing. And enables partnership and working with education, schools, and such like. And in terms of transparency and cost efficiency, Inspire is supposed to be able to help us do things faster and easier. Now, I think that's quite a long way down the line, but that's one of the things that the air quality community was sold on in terms of signing up and Inspire into its regulations. And the reduced information, this element is quite an important one, quite a big issue in the UK, freedom of information requests. If your data is already out there, then you can just refer the FOIs to the data that's out there. That might get unpicked and unpeeled, and you want to get to data that can't be put out there, but if it's sensitive information, it shouldn't be open data. A few words about the links between air quality and Inspire. We currently have now a new system for reporting air quality across Europe. It's called Air Quality E-Reporting. That came into being as of December of last year. And in 2008, the air quality regulations were revised, and some bright spark wrote Inspire in the revised regulations. So not only are we captured in the Annex 3 data themes, we've got it written in our own air quality regulations, which is a kind of a double whammy, and makes it difficult to avoid Inspire. And the idea of air quality e-reporting was to look at the old regimes for reporting, look at modelizing the regulations, streamlining the reporting, upgrading the standards, certainly systems and services, and bring them up to spec with the Inspire concepts and principles. And also, there was at the time, back in 2008, 2009, air quality was seen as a good fit with Inspire because it's a cross-cutting Annex 3 data theme, and it's very observational data rich, both in terms of in situ single point observations, but model predictions, coverages, raster data sets from models and things like that, predictions on vectors like transport networks and things. So cross-cutting fit with Inspire there. The implementation steps that have taken the last 4 years to implement, we have gone through the regulations, gone through the information requirements from an air quality perspective, streamlined and redesigned the air quality domain data model, and then mapped that against these guys, the Inspire data specs that fell into scope, plus some observational stuff over here, of course. And then the slides say then we extended the Inspire data specifications. But I think it's fair to say it's kind of, I would think of it the other way around. we fitted the Inspire stuff in with the air quality domain stuff. There's far more air quality domain extensions than there are base Inspire stuff, which I think is something that you need to think about. I've seen a couple of presentations in the last 2 days, and referring to your data set, data types that don't fit in with Inspire, extend this Inspire steps, because it's your domain data. You shouldn't lose that stuff. And Inspire is there to be extended. It's a generic catch-all. It's never going to fit everything. Then we did some UML modeling, and then we bunged the UML over to the JRC, and they put it through shape change and generated an application schema, which we're now using to do some reporting. So that's where we are in that context. A word, because it would be wrong otherwise, Ricardo AEA's involvement. We've been managing UK government's air quality data services for about the last 20 years. For the last 4 years, I've been the task leader for the European Topic Centre on Air and Climate Change, which was looking to assist the EEA in implementing this reporting system across Europe. So we've been tailoring the data model and all the services, and then the vocabs, and getting all the pilot countries to contribute, and trying to get it off the ground as of last year. And the valuable contributions from the EEA Topic Centre on Climate Change Mitigation, RIVM in the Netherlands, Forsfera in Spain, Uber Vienna, who provided a hell of a lot of UML modelling support, the JRC, and not least my paymasters, DEFRA, in the UK government. So pre-Inspire, open data and e-reporting, the UK air quality data systems are already pretty well established. We had a localized data catalogue for discovery and view. When I say localized, it was aimed at the air quality community, and it wasn't federated to data.gov, which is our Inspire node. So air quality specialists went to this place and discovered the data, but no one else really knew about it. We had a kind of 3-star open data score in the data that we served from this website here. Serving data in a wide range of data formats, open formats, proprietary formats too, where that was beneficial. We had an open data license, and if you want to know about open data, please do go to Open Data Licenses for Governments. This is the one that we use. It might be helpful. And we provided user access to CSV downloads of air quality data, which was aimed at desktop users, not machines, but it was machine readable via the URL queries and things like that. But that was largely CSV downloads, and we had a range of Inspire viewing services and also geoprocessing services, which supported air quality measurements and monitoring locations and that sort of information. The geoprocessing services operated on the air quality model data, which are largely raster data sets. So we used some Esri technologies to set up geoprocessing to extract that from data sets. So that was quite a helpful thing, and it makes use of a vast array of data going back over 10 years for 12 different pollutants. So what has happened since we adopted Inspire and moved to e-reporting is these last few bullet points down here. We now have a system and a regime for URIs based on HTTP URI schemes for all our air quality spatial objects. And when I say a spatial object, I'm talking about a sampling point or a station or an air quality management zone or something like that. Feature of interest if you want to get into Inspire parlance. And we have an object registry, which, because we have these URIs, and associated with those URIs, a whole raft of metadata, attribute data, not discovery metadata, but metadata about our stations, the configuration of the station. You can now use these URIs via this registry to render the attribute data in HTML or Inspire compliant XML. And now we're also trying to develop, or we have developed, we haven't quite made them operational, some atom feeds which will replicate to a large extent the CSV downloads that we have generated up here. So we had existing systems to generate these CSV downloads. So we wanted to reuse those systems in an atom feed rather than develop a feature service or SOS, but we're also looking at that. So the benefits of those 3 bullet points, which are quite significant around Inspire and air quality reporting, and the benefits to open data, you can see in this slide. And we have the features that we've added on the left, driven by Inspire and e-reporting, and the benefits over here. So we now have the facility for linking our data persistently within the internet domain. So that automatically, in my view, kind of moves it on from a 3-star rating to a 4-star rating. We can now effectively link other data to this identifier. We've got Inspire harvested discovery services, so we have improved discovery. Standards-based data model, which you can find at this location. It's an XSD. So if you go there and you're disappointed, I'm warning you, there is other information elsewhere on that I can provide you links to. But this provides improved potential for linked data and harvesting of data, promotion of machine readability via the atom feeds that we've got, using that data model. And then behind that, sitting behind that, we have a whole set of vocabularies and registries, hosting those vocabularies and code lists. So that reinforces the internal consistency in the data, which via this method is pretty open. Core challenges: it hasn't been plain sailing by any stretch of the imagination. It's been good, but it hasn't been plain sailing. The biggest problem is getting buy-in from your domain specialists. They don't like calling their sampling points features of interest. Their sampling points, it's a big hurdle for them, unfortunately. I've heard this second bullet this week. The Inspire documentation is very technical. It's aimed at IT specialists. It's hard for these guys to buy in when they can't understand the black and white. But Inspire knows about that, so it's all good. And then from an air quality perspective, we had to manage a misalignment of the air quality ambitions in terms of its timetable and the Inspire ambitions in terms of its timetable. Air quality was moving faster than Inspire, and the Inspire schemas were changing, and we wanted to be stable, and we had to change, and then they changed them again, and then it was hard. And it was hard for IT developers because they had to keep on reinventing the wheel every time the schemas changed. I think I've said that technical hurdle of XML is tough for domain specialists. And a key point, there's a significant upfront cost to Inspire, and the payback is quite a long way down the line. So, in summary, Inspire and the e-reporting initiative and the principles and concepts that underpin it are well in line with the Open Data Initiative, and it has delivered benefits in the UK. They promote improved sharing of air quality information. Evidential reuse is really important in UK government. There's a lot of public money invested in air quality monitoring, in making it INSPIRE compliant. If INSPIRE and open data can show that that data is being reused, then that supports and that justifies the public expenditure. And INSPIRE and open data is quite good for that. And it just opens up data for use in web services and apps, things like that. As INSPIRE matures, the technical hurdles must reduce. Has got to happen, and I'm pretty sure it will happen as the web services become more flexible. And examples become more stable. That will happen. But services must become truly open and flexible going forward. We have OGC and open source implementations of things like WFS, SOS, which are nailed down to a specific template for reporting. And in the air quality world, we can't shoehorn our data into that template. So we need to be a bit more flexible in how we set up those services. But we've been talking to 52 North, for example, about making that more flexible, and we've got their support. So INSPIRE maturity will bring significant benefits to many domains, supporting policy, in my view, and delivering user needs at a domain level. I think that's it.
Thank you, Tony. It was a really interesting presentation. I didn't want to cut you, but it seems we are out of time. So I propose we move questions for the coffee break, so you can ask Tony probably on the coffee if you have any particular question. Let me just sum up a little bit this session. I think it was really interesting session, and we really can see a lot of benefits already from INSPIRE. I think this is very important and strong message. However, there are still some challenges. First of all, how do we engage more private sector, private companies? Then maybe from the Bastiaan research, how can we really test robustness of an SDI? Is it really reliable? Maturity of SDI, and how to align more INSPIRE with other directives. I think this is also something important for the future work. So by this, I would like to close this session. Thank you, first of all, thank to our presenters today in this session, and thank to all of you to be here with us in this session. Thank you very much.